The Summer I Said Yes Part 1. Chapter 1. The Proposal That Wasn't. Manhattan, late afternoon. Bianchi International Headquarters. The view from the 46th floor was distracting on a normal day. Today, it was criminal. Ivy Emerson sat ramrod straight in a cream buccal chair, the city glittering behind her like it knew something she didn't. The office was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made your palms sweat. Not that hers were, yet. But they were definitely, considering it. Across the long obsidian desk sat Matteo Bianchi, billionaire, hotel tycoon, and, as of 26 seconds ago, completely unhinged. Or so it seemed. Because he had just said, "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." The words were still hanging in the air like a luxury chandelier that had snapped from the ceiling but hadn't quite fallen yet. Ivy blinked. Once. Twice. "Come again." Her voice cracked like the surface of a too-perfect creme brulee. Matteo didn't flinch. Of course he didn't. His suits were probably pressed by retired Olympic gymnasts. The man didn't do flinching. He leaned back in his chair, one hand smoothing down the front of his navy jacket. That jacket alone looked like it cost more than her college loans. Plural. "I said," he repeated, very calmly, "I need you to come to Italy with me for the summer. And I need you to pretend to be my fiancé." Like it was a to-do list item. Like bring Ivy came right after confirm yacht fuel delivery. She laughed. Actually laughed. Because surely this was one of those tests. Maybe he was filming her for HR training. Watch how the assistant doesn't fall for the absurd billionaire trick. Except, he wasn't smiling. Oh no. He was serious. Her eyes darted to the side, toward the massive tinted windows. All of Manhattan was out there, cab horns, branch lines, her entire comfort zone. And here she was in a tower of glass and steel being asked to sign up for a European romantic drama with her boss of 2 years. Not just any boss. Matteo Bianchi. The man who answered emails at 4:45 a.m. and showed up to morning meetings with perfect hair and no coffee breath. The one who made headlines in glossy magazines without ever giving interviews. The one who spoke in clipped, quiet tones that made boardrooms go dead silent. That man wanted her to pretend to be in love with him. No, no, no. She was not the lead in some streaming series. She was Ivy Emerson, extremely capable, occasionally snooky, and spectacularly unqualified to fake a relationship with her own reflection, let alone a man who probably owned half of Tuscany. "Why me?" she asked, voice small but still standing. "You have a whole Rolodex of." "I don't keep a Rolodex." "Women," she pressed. "Real ones. Elegant. Fluent in 6 languages. You know, the type who actually own evening gowns and don't Google which side of the plate the fancy bread goes on." Matteo didn't smirk. Not really. But his lips did one of those things, just the corners, just for a flicker, like the idea of her panic was mildly amusing. "I need someone I trust," he said. "And someone my grandmother hasn't met." Ah. There it was. He leaned forward now, his elbows resting lightly on the desk, his fingers steepled, the posture of a man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted without ever having to raise his voice. "She's 83. She wants to see me settled," he said simply. "She asked me to bring home the woman I'm going to marry. Not next year. This summer." Ivy opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her brain had tripped over itself and was now flat on the floor. He continued, unbothered. "There's a family event. A small one. Just a few hundred people. Garden parties, beach dinners, church bells. My cousin's wedding. And Nonna Bianca has it in her mind that I'm next. If I show up empty-handed. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ivy could already picture it, the disappointed sigh, the slow nod, the probably epic side-eye. Grandmothers were an international power class. Matteo looked at her then, properly. For the first time that day, maybe the first time ever, not through the lens of work, not across a pile of contracts, not while rattling off hotel occupancy stats. And it hit her. He looked tired. Not tired like jet lag or skipped lunch tired. But the kind of tired that lives in your bones. The kind that shows up when family is involved. I'll pay you, he added. Handsomely. Time off after. A bonus. You name it. Oh, money. Right. That old thing. Ivy felt her mouth go dry. She could almost hear her brain throwing a meeting. We are not seriously considering this, right? Right. But she was. Because somewhere under the shock, under the absurdity, a tiny door had opened inside her, and behind it was sunlight. Italy. The Amalfi Coast. Lemon trees. White dresses. And possibility. Her entire adult life had been carefully, diligently boring. Structured. Responsible. Calculated. Nothing spontaneous, nothing that couldn't be written in a planner 3 weeks in advance. And now here was a man offering her a ticket to one of the most beautiful places on earth. All she had to do was play along. Pretend. Lie. Not forever. Just a summer. Ivy swallowed. Looked him dead in the eye. You're serious? Yes. Completely. Down to the monogrammed luggage. She hesitated. She blinked again. Then, Lord help her, she said it. Okay. Yes. And just like that, the chandelier fell. Chapter 2 Passport Panic. Manhattan, that evening. Ivy's apartment in Murray Hill. It hit her in the elevator. She hadn't said no. The mirrored doors slid shut with a whisper, and Ivy saw herself, hair slightly frizzed from humidity, lipstick faded, a tiny stain of salad dressing on her blouse from a lunch she barely remembered. And in the reflection, a woman who had just agreed to pretend to be someone's fiancée. In Italy. A billionaire's fake fiancé. I need wine, she muttered. The elevator dinged, and she stumbled out like someone had just pushed her off a cliff. She walked the familiar hallway in a daze, her heels tapping out an erratic rhythm against the concrete floors of her walk-up building. It smelled like someone's dinner, heavy on garlic, and a little like wet dog. Probably both. Inside her tiny studio apartment, Ivy dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and let out a long, unfiltered groan. Then it hit her again. The kind of thought that comes like a punch in the middle of a peaceful Sunday. She didn't have a passport. She froze. No. Wait. Wait. Maybe she did. She might have applied for one once, back when she thought she might study abroad in Florence. Back before student loans convinced her that dreams were for people with fewer emails. She darted to the plastic storage bin under her bed, the one labeled important stuff in red Sharpie, and began rifling through old pay stubs, tax forms, expired college IDs, and a tragic journal from high school, which she regretted rereading immediately. No passport. Okay, she said aloud, pacing in a circle that barely cleared her coffee table. Okay, Ivy. No big deal. Plenty of time. Matteo said summer. It's, what, still spring? She grabbed her phone. Checked the calendar. The 3rd of June. Her laugh was a full, slightly manic cackle. Of course it is. She googled. How fast can I get a passport? Emergency passport NYC. I lied and told a billionaire I could fly to Italy. What do I do? The results were not comforting. Expedited services. Appointments. Rush fees. And everything came with a warning, maybe delayed due to high demand. She felt her stomach start to flip. This was it. The catch. The universe's way of saying, nice try, Ivy. Go back to your spreadsheets. But then her phone buzzed. Matteo Bianchi. Yes, she had him in her phone like that. Who wouldn't? Text. You'll need a passport by the end of the week. My assistant will send you everything you need to expedite. Trust me, it's handled. Also, do you have luggage? Do I have what? She looked around her apartment. Her only suitcase was soft-sided, zippered, and tragically beige. It had one wheel that didn't rotate and a sticker that said Vegas 2016. It did not scream glamorous fiancée of a European hotel mogul. She flopped onto the couch, a second-hand sleeper with uneven cushions, and stared at the ceiling. This was ridiculous. She should back out. Tell him she panicked. Tell him the whole thing was insane. But even as the logic stormed around her head, something deeper, quieter hummed beneath it all. You want this. You've always wanted this. Not the fake engagement. Not the stress. But the story. The departure. The kind of thing people in novels do, leave the country on a Tuesday and wake up somewhere with citrus trees and secrets. Her phone buzzed again. New email from Maril Executive Travel Concierge. Subject: Passport appointment confirmed. Hello Ivy. Your passport appointment is confirmed for tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m. Please bring 2 forms of ID. I've also scheduled a fitting at Bergdorf's and a pre-travel consultation at Bianchi International. Packing list and styling notes attached. Best. Maril. Ivy reread it 3 times. Bergdorf's, she whispered, like saying Narnia out loud. This was real. It was happening. She was going to Italy. But first, she needed to find her social security card. And possibly buy real luggage. And maybe start emotionally preparing to lie to an Italian grandmother in the most romantic country on earth. Her cat, Margot, blinked at her from the windowsill. Ivy turned to her, desperate for a reality check. I said yes, she told the cat. Margot gave a slow blink. Translation: You're on your own, girl. Chapter 3: Flight of Firsts. 2 days later, Teterboro Private Airport, New Jersey. The car smelled like leather and eucalyptus. The driver hadn't said a word since helping her in. Everything was smooth, too smooth. Even the air outside the tinted window seemed polished, like the humidity had been told to behave. Ivy sat stiffly in the back seat, holding onto her brand new carry-on like it was a life raft. Navy blue, hard shell, wheels that actually spun in a circle. Thank you, Matteo's Amex. She hadn't even dared peel the price tag off the matching travel pouch. It probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her passport, freshly minted, still stiff, was tucked safely inside, nestled next to her boarding documents, a mini Evian spray bottle. She still wasn't entirely sure how that worked, and a ridiculous pair of oversized sunglasses she felt too embarrassed to actually wear. As they pulled up to the private hangar, Ivy sat up straighter. There it was. The jet. White, sleek, a floating luxury apartment with wings. It had his name discreetly printed near the tail, Bianchi in elegant serif font, subtle but unmistakable. Even his aircraft branding was tasteful. Ivy blinked. Her mouth was dry again. She had Googled this moment, late the night before. What to wear? What not to say? She'd watched 2 TikToks titled How to Not Look Like You've Never Been on a Private Jet and still felt like she was going to trip and knock over a champagne tray the second she stepped on board. The car door opened. The driver gestured politely. She got out, smoothing down the wide-leg cream pants Maril had picked out for her. Linen, tailored, cool in the breeze. She'd never worn anything like them. She couldn't even sit in them yesterday without Googling how to sit in expensive pants. And then, Matteo. He stepped out of a separate car, of course. He wore navy again, but this time it was casual, a soft cashmere sweater over a collared shirt, cuffed chinos, expensive sunglasses pushed into his dark curls like he forgot they were even there. Of course they looked accidental. Of course they made him look like he stepped out of a travel ad. He walked toward her, suitcase rolled behind him, nodding once. You made it, he said. Ivy raised an eyebrow. Was there a version where I didn't? He shrugged lightly. Most people would have backed out by now. Well, she said, lifting her chin, good thing I'm not most people. He didn't smile exactly, but the corner of his mouth tugged just slightly, and it was enough to make Ivy's stomach do something extremely unprofessional. They boarded the jet together, up a staircase that felt more like the entrance to a yacht than a plane. She'd expected cramped, shiny metal, but this was surreal. Cream leather seats. Polished wood accents. A velvet throw blanket, draped over the back of one chair like someone had just casually napped there. A bar, already stocked. A tray with fruit, cheeses, and something that looked like a lemon tart. Real glassware. Not a single plastic cup in sight. She stood just inside the doorway, unsure where to sit. Or whether to breathe too loudly. Matteo brushed past her and dropped into a wide seat by the window, already flipping open his tablet. He looked up. Sit anywhere, he said. We've got 9 hours to Italy. 9 hours. 9 hours of pretending this was normal. She chose a seat across from him, unsure if that was the correct etiquette. She didn't want to seem clingy, or weirdly formal, or like she was trying to sit too far away. These were new categories of social anxiety, ones she hadn't trained for. A flight attendant, whose lipstick matched her blazer in a way Ivy found deeply intimidating, offered her a glass of champagne. Ivy hesitated, then nodded. It was crisp. Cold. Like liquid money. Matteo glanced up from his tablet. You're allowed to enjoy it. She swallowed. I'm just trying not to break anything. You won't. Easy for him to say. She leaned back, carefully, into the plush leather, letting herself settle into the sensation. The seat reclined slightly, like it anticipated her discomfort and wanted to help. She looked out the window. The tarmac gleamed under the late morning sun. And then, quietly, the jet began to move. No announcements. No seatbelt speech. Just a soft hum, a slow glide forward, and then, lift. Smooth, steady, surreal. Ivy let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She was airborne. Really airborne. Somewhere over New Jersey, Ivy slipped off her shoes and tucked her legs up under her. Matteo had ordered coffee. She could smell the dark roast from where she sat. It wasn't paper cup coffee. It smelled like whatever people in Monaco drink while casually buying real estate. He glanced up. Their eyes met. "You don't fly much, do you?" he asked, but not unkindly. "Not even commercial," she said, half laughing. "I've never left the country. Unless you count a weird overnight layover in Toronto once. But I don't, because I spent the whole time crying in a Tim Hortons." That tug of a smile again. This time, a little more real. "Well," he said, setting down his tablet, "then welcome to your first real flight." She took another sip of champagne. "Feels fake." "Good. That's half the point." Somewhere over the Atlantic, the flight attendant handed her a silk sleep mask. Matte navy, embroidered with the initials B.H.I in silver. She stared at it for a moment, then turned to Matteo. "You're kidding." "What? You monogram your sleep masks?" He shrugged, folding his arms behind his head. "You'd be surprised how often people take them." Ivy shook her head. "I'm in a Netflix show, aren't I? This is episode 2 and I just haven't realized it yet." He chuckled, actually chuckled, and it felt so strange, so genuine, that she stared at him. Matteo Bianchi, laughing. Not in the boardroom. Not during quarterly reviews. Just, here. In the clouds. With her. She turned her face toward the window, not trusting herself to look at him any longer. She didn't know what was scarier, that she was flying across the ocean into a lie, or that she was starting to like it. Chapter 4 Amalfi Arrival. Cape Odicino Airport, Naples. Early morning light. Ivy had never seen light like this. It wasn't just morning. It was Italian morning, that impossible, golden kind of light that photographers spend years chasing and never quite capture. The kind that made cracked pavement look like cobblestone and strangers look like models from a cologne ad. And Ivy looked like a woman who hadn't fully grasped the situation. She stood at the top of the airplane stairs, gripping the cool steel railing with one hand, her silk scarf fluttering at her neck like it was trying to run away without her. Below her, the runway, the private hangar, the waiting SUV. And behind all that, hills. Mountains, actually. Dusted in green, their edges hazy with mist. And further still, the glint. The sea. Matteo's voice floated up behind her. "Don't just stand there like you've seen heaven. It's better from the car." Ivy turned slowly. He was still inside, thanking the flight crew, already re-shouldering his leather duffel like he'd done this trip so many times it barely registered. "Is it always like this?" she asked, eyes wide. He smirked. "You mean is Italy always Italy?" "Yes." She descended the stairs, trying to walk gracefully in her flats. Muriel had said no heels for arrivals, which made no sense until this moment, when the sun kissed her shoulders and the wind lifted her hair and she realized, this wasn't a place for rushing. Everything in Italy, apparently, moved like a seduction. The SUV waiting on the tarmac was matte black, with air conditioning that smelled faintly like bergamot. Ivy barely noticed, too busy gawking out the window as they left the airport. Palm trees. Flower boxes overflowing with red geraniums. Laundry hanging from balconies that looked like they'd seen emperors. Then the coast. One winding turn, and it was there, vast and shimmering, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly into a soft blue haze. Villas perched on cliffs like they'd grown out of the stone itself. Bougainvillea spilled over walls in wild pink waves. Ivy pressed a hand to the glass. "I thought it would look more like a postcard," she whispered. Matteo, beside her, glanced over. "This is where they take the postcards from." The car hugged the cliffside roads, weaving higher into the hills. Ivy clutched her seat belt more than once, not because she was scared, but because it felt like something you should do when you were surrounded by this much beauty and danger. Italy wasn't subtle. It wasn't careful. It was opera. It took over an hour to reach the villa. And when they did, Ivy almost forgot how to speak. It wasn't a house. It was a scene. The Villa Bianchi sat on a terraced cliffside, surrounded by lemon groves and old stone pines. The building itself was a soft ochre, not yellow, not gold, but the kind of color you only saw on ancient stucco, kissed by centuries of sun. Ivy spotted Ivy, the plant, not herself, crawling up one of the arched walls, framing a balcony with iron railings and flower boxes overflowing with purple petunias. The driveway was lined with cypress trees. The entrance was flanked by two marble columns so tall they cast shadows over the mosaic-tiled steps. Ivy stepped out of the SUV and had one single, clear thought. "I do not belong here." But it wasn't jealousy or shame. It wasn't even intimidation. It was something deeper, a dissonance. Like her very bones recognized the difference between her world and this one. In her world, luxury came with strings. Here, it just existed. Like air. Like stone. Like inheritance. She smoothed her dress, crisp white cotton with pearl buttons, chosen carefully for its graceful simplicity as per Mariel's email, and tried to keep her expression neutral. Calm. Cool. The kind of expression someone would have if they'd grown up attending garden luncheons under grape arbors. "Ready?" Matteo asked, stepping beside her. "Absolutely not," she murmured. He didn't wait for her answer. He simply took her hand, took it, and began leading her toward the grand front entrance. And then the doors opened. A burst of warm air, scented with lemon and rosemary. The soft creak of old stone. And a woman, tall, silver-haired, standing like a matriarch from a period film, smiled from the top of a staircase. "Ivy," Matteo said smoothly, still holding her hand, "this is my grandmother. Nonna Bianca." Oh. So this was the woman she was about to lie to for the next 6 weeks. Chapter 5 Nonna Bianca. Villa Bianchi, late morning, the grand entry hall. The first thing Ivy noticed about Nonna Bianca was her stillness. She didn't rush down the stairs like a woman excited to meet her grandson's fiancée. She didn't beam, or squeal, or flutter. No, she waited. Poised. Observing. Like a queen on a landing. She wore dove-grey silk, soft as fog, with a strand of pearls that looked older than modern banking. Her posture was impeccable. Her silver hair was swept back into a low, coiled twist, like it had been done hours ago and hadn't moved a centimeter since. And her eyes, sharp, pale blue, clear as Venetian glass, locked on Ivy with the kind of quiet intensity that made Ivy instinctively stand up straighter, chin slightly lifted. A full-body reflex. Fight or flight, but make it couture. "Ivy," Matteo said gently, his hand still warm against her back, "this is my grandmother, Bianca Bianchi. Nonna, this is Ivy Emerson." Still no movement from the top of the stairs. A heartbeat. 2. Then. You've brought me an American, Nonna Bianca said. The accent was delicate but unmistakable, Northern Italy, polished with the elegance of someone who'd spent time in Paris, or Geneva, or the kind of Rome that came with private chefs. Ivy opened her mouth. Closed it. Then nodded. Guilty. The tiniest flicker of a smile. A test. Passed, maybe. Matteo extended an arm, offering Ivy his hand again, not romantically, not possessively, but supportively. And Ivy took it. She let him guide her slowly up the stairs, heels clicking softly against the polished marble, her breath catching slightly at the grandeur of the space, high ceilings, frescoes in soft golds and greens, crystal sconces on the walls that glimmered in the morning light. She tried not to feel like a trespasser. Tried not to feel the weight of the Bianchi family legacy pressing in from every direction. At the top, Nonna extended one hand. Ivy reached out, careful not to grip too tightly or too softly. Her skin was cool and dry, but firm. No tremble. No fragility. Ivy, Nonna said slowly, like she was tasting the name. That's not Italian. No, Ivy said, offering a small smile. But I make excellent espresso, if that helps. A pause. And then, there it was. A soft, delicate smile. Barely there, but it changed her entire face. Matteo let out a quiet breath beside her, the kind of breath that said thank God. Come, Nonna said, turning with effortless grace. Let's sit. She led them into a salon that overlooked the garden. Every step she took was deliberate, the quiet elegance of someone used to being listened to without ever raising her voice. Ivy followed, trying not to trip on the sheer beauty of the space, velvet armchairs in antique rows, silk curtains that floated in the breeze, a tea tray already set with porcelain so fine she didn't dare breathe near it. They sat. Ivy on the edge of a chair that probably predated the invention of the zipper. Matteo on the loveseat beside her, legs casually crossed, like he was trying not to look like he was watching the scene unfold, but Ivy could feel him doing exactly that. Nonna Bianca poured the tea herself. No staff. No ceremony. Just 3 cups, quiet hands, and a subtle gold bracelet that gleamed whenever she moved. You're his assistant, she said, not a question. I am. Still working, then. Ivy hesitated. Well, I've taken a leave of absence, she said carefully. To focus on this. She glanced at Matteo, who gave her a barely there nod of approval. Matteo works too much, Nonna said, placing the teapot down. He needs balance. Warmth. Someone who understands that there is more to life than numbers. Her eyes were on Ivy, steady and searching. And Ivy, heart pounding like a drum solo inside a Versus showroom, smiled gently. I'm not a numbers person. At all. I do, however, believe in long breakfasts and mid-afternoon naps. So maybe I'm good for him after all. Silence. Nonna took a slow sip of her tea. Then another. Ivy's palms were damp. The fine china cup in her hand felt heavier by the second. Then, Nonna set her cup down. And smiled. Fully this time. Her entire face softened, her eyes crinkled at the edges. It was like watching a glacier melt, one perfect crack at a time. I like her, she said aloud. Matteo, stunned for a beat, laughed once. Already? She didn't flinch, Nonna said, gesturing to Ivy. Did you see? She met my eyes, she didn't fake her smile, and she didn't try to impress me with anything she read on Wikipedia. I despise that. Ivy blinked. People read Wikipedia about you. Of course, she said matter-of-factly. I'm fascinating. And just like that, the room shifted. The air lightened. The test was over. Ivy sank just a little deeper into the chair, letting her shoulders drop half an inch. Still smiling, Nonna reached for a biscuit. So tell me, Ivy. How did you and Matteo fall in love? Matteo froze. And Ivy, with every muscle in her body screaming lie well, smiled softly, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "It wasn't dramatic. We just saw each other. And that was it." Nonna's eyes glinted. "Sometimes," she said, "that's all it takes." Chapter 6: The Glamorous Lie. Evening, Villa Bianci's cliffside terrace, Amalfi Coast. It smelled like lemon trees and salt water. The terrace was set for 20. Maybe more. Ivy didn't count, she was too distracted by the way the linen tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, by the flicker of candlelight in glass hurricanes, by the faint sound of waves far below. The long table curved slightly with the shape of the stone terrace, like it had been built to follow the cliff's edge. Beyond the railing, the open sea, indigo now, stretching into the horizon like it had no end. It was breathtaking. And Ivy had never been more terrified in her life. She stood just off to the side, clutching a clutch, why were they called that, again, and trying not to visibly sweat through the silk lining of her borrowed evening dress. It was pale green, chosen by Muriel, with delicate straps and a subtle sheen that caught the fading sunlight just right. She felt like a walking watercolor. A fraud in heels. The guests were already arriving. Cousins. Aunts. A few impossibly elegant people she couldn't even place on the family tree Matteo had half sketched for her in the car. Everyone was hugging, air-kissing, laughing in rapid Italian. Ivy caught about 4 words, total, one of them might have been about risotto. Matteo, of course, was perfect. Dark suit, open collar, no tie. Not overdressed, not under. Tan like he'd been kissed by the Amalfi sun every day since birth. He greeted everyone with an ease that made Ivy ache, not because she envied it, but because she needed it. She needed him. He came to her side eventually, offering her a glass of something sparkling and lightly golden. She took it without asking what it was. "Ready?" he asked softly. "I feel like I'm about to be sacrificed to a fashionable cult." "They don't bite." "Maybe not. But they whisper." He smiled. "Stick with me." She did. He took her hand and led her down the steps to the main gathering. Instantly, heads turned. Conversations slowed. A few expressions turned curious. One woman, sharp cheekboned, silk chiffoned, judgment radiating from her posture, didn't bother hiding her slow once-over of Ivy's entire ensemble. Matteo leaned in. "That's Chiara. The cousin. The one who doesn't trust anyone." "Oh. Great." They reached the table. Matteo made the rounds, fluent in Italian and charm, while Ivy stood just behind his shoulder, smiling too much and hoping no one asked her anything she couldn't bluff her way through. Then came the introductions. "This," Matteo said, finally turning, his hand still resting lightly on her lower back, "is Ivy. My fiancée." The word felt louder than it should have. There was a beat of silence. Just half a second. Then. Warm smiles. Soft exclamations. A chorus of Piaceria. And Benvenuta. And a few raised brows Ivy couldn't interpret. She smiled. Shook hands. nodded like she understood. They sat, Ivy to Matteo's left, Nonna Bianca to his right. The staff moved around them with practiced ease, setting down bowls of olives, platters of fresh bread, little dishes of something golden and fragrant that Ivy didn't recognize but adored instantly. And then the questions began. So said one of the uncles, bald, tanned, with a gold watch that caught the candlelight, how did you two meet? The air shifted. Matteo reached for his wine. Slowly. Like he was buying her time. Ivy blinked. Oh, she said lightly. At work. That wasn't enough. They wanted more. They wanted story. We didn't exactly like each other at first, she added, willing herself to sound warm, casual, amused. He was, how do I put this nicely, an intense boss. There were chuckles around the table. Matteo raised an eyebrow, playing along. And she was late to her second interview, he said, voice dry. I got hit by a bike messenger. You called me from the curb. I was bleeding. You asked if the blood would stain your blouse. More laughter now. Real this time. It was working. Ivy blinked, realizing that for the first time all evening, her chest didn't feel tight. Someone across the table leaned in, one of Matteo's cousins, a woman in bold red lipstick and matching earrings. But how did you know, she asked. That it was love. Ah. Here it comes. Ivy hesitated. Matteo glanced sideways at her. The look was subtle, unreadable. But she could feel it, that flicker of electricity that meant you first. She took a sip of her drink. It tasted like sunshine and something floral. I think I knew the moment he stayed late, she said slowly, just to make sure I got home safe after a terrible meeting. I'd been crying in the supply closet, don't tell HR, and I came out to find him waiting by the elevator with 2 cups of tea. Matteo smiled slightly. Chamomile, he said. I had to Google what kind. And he didn't say anything. He just handed it to me. That was it. That's when I knew. There was a quiet around the table now, soft, affectionate, tinged with just enough romantic tension to be believable. Then Matteo spoke. And I knew, he said, his voice lower now, when she told me she hated everything about corporate culture, and still came back the next morning, with the worst coffee I've ever tasted, and said let's try again. Ivy blinked. That hadn't been in the fake backstreet prep. That had happened. The table sighed. Literally sighed. Nonna Bianca beamed. Chiara looked unconvinced, but quieter than before. The food kept coming. Pasta with lemon cream sauce. Grilled sea bass with capers. Ivy let Matteo guide her through the courses, through the wine pairings, through the knowing glances and clever questions and the occasional suspicious pause. But it was working. The lie was working. They were a couple. They were in love. And somehow, the more they played it, the more it began to feel dangerous. Not because of the lie, but because somewhere beneath the performance, something else was growing. Something softer. Something less scripted. As the moon rose higher and the sea grew darker and the candles flickered lower, Ivy turned to Matteo and whispered, that was surprisingly convincing. He didn't smile. Not this time. He just looked at her, eyes unreadable, and said, you were brilliant. And somehow, that scared her more than the lie itself. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.